creating these different tools and resources, mainly just for myself when I play fantasy football, tools
Right.
that I like to use. And one of my buddies was like, you have to put this thing on Reddit. You have to put this out there into the world. There's other people that would love this. And candidly, at the time, I was reluctant. I didn't want to put it on Reddit because I was scared. I was scared of Reddit because people are ruthless on the internet. And yeah, long story short, I reluctantly finally put it out there, and it blew up. Got to a point where people were asking for my Venmo so that they could donate me money for the resources. And I think that was a big light bulb for me when I realized, holy crap, this is something that people find value in, right? This is something that I can try and build around. And before long, it went from side hustle and passion project to, hey man, I'm diving all in. I'm quitting the corporate 9-to-5 world, and I'm going after this thing.
This is Over a Pint podcast, the podcast that puts the focus on marketing. If you are just joining us for the first time, you're in for a freaking treat. Mikey Henninger is in the house with us. We're going to be talking fantasy football. We're going to be talking entrepreneur. We're going to be talking sales. We're going to be talking marketing. It's going to be a dynamite conversation. Usually at this point, I'm joined by my main man, Mr. Kurt Lingle. Got a text from him right before the show started. He's not going to be able to join us today. I'm driving the super tanker by myself. I got my hands on the wheel and I'm ready to go. But before we get into this, I want to say hello to Mikey. And Mikey, what do you got in front of you?
What am I drinking? Yeah, Pat, thanks for having me on. So I am actually sipping on, thank you, by the way, for, not that we need it in Wisconsin, but thank you for permission to drink a beer at noon on a Monday. I love it. But I am sipping on a single hop pale ale from Enlighten Brewery. Have you been to Enlighten? Yeah, man. They have some of my favorite stuff. Actually, my favorite beer on the planet is called Cream City Brix from Enlightened. Have you been down to that brewery, Pat?
I have not.
If you squeak down there specifically during the weekend, either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, they usually have a local barbecue joint called Sweet Smoke MKE come in, and like their food is off the charts when it comes to ribs and hot links and burgers and all that stuff. So if you're gonna go to Enlightened, go in on a weekend and play some pool, drink some beers, eat some food. It's delicious beer, great brewery, and I come to know one of the guys who runs the brewery, and he's awesome. So it's I recommend it to anybody in Milwaukee.
Oh man, that sounds fantastic. Two of my faves, beer and barbecue.
Yep.
Mikey, I've got a Mobcraft low funk sour ale that I'm going to be enjoying today from the good peeps at Mobcraft. This is going to tasty. I've also got a LaCroix. So I am loaded to bear. Mikey, let's get into what?
You're gonna have to let me know about that sour. My wife is big into sour, so if that's a good one, I got to get it for her.
Fantastic. Mikey, let's get into this thing. And let me set the stage a little bit. Mikey is the founder, CEO of Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. This is a crazy, interesting story. And I'm not going to tell it. So, Mikey, you jump in and start talking about, give us the origin story of you, right? Set the table.
Man, the origin story. Yeah, honestly, man, this thing, if you really think about the roots of where this all began, we're talking early, like childhood. I'm talking like 7, 8 years old when this whole kind of dream kind of began. I don't know if you remember those old NFL pencils. It had, like, every pencil had a different team on it.
I do.
When I was a kid, I invented, right, quote unquote, invented a game where I would close my eyes, I would take 2 of those pencils, twirl them in my hands like this, and then drop one. And whichever one I dropped, that was the losing team. Whichever one I was still holding, that was the winning team. And I'm not kidding, Pat. I have notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of like who won, who lost, who won Super Bowls, and I would make these Super Bowl banners. This is just a game that I invented to entertain myself for 7 to 8 years, or when I was about 7, 8 years old. Fast forward to 18 years old, and the best man at my wedding introduces me to fantasy football, and right there, a obsession is just an unhealthy obsession at times, but an obsession is born. And I played for years. I played for over a decade while I was, getting out of college, entering the working world. I spent a decade in B2B sales, technology sales, before I even thought about doing this fantasy football thing. And eventually, a time in life came where I was creating these different tools and resources, mainly just for myself when I play fantasy football, tools
Right.
that I like to use. And one of my buddies was like, you have to put this thing on Reddit. You have to put this out there into the world. There's other people that would love this. And candidly, at the time, I was reluctant. I didn't want to put it on Reddit because I was scared. I was scared of Reddit because people are ruthless
Yeah.
on the internet. And long story short, I reluctantly finally put it out there, and it blew up. Got to a point where people were asking for my Venmo so that they could donate me money for the resources. And I think that was a big light bulb for me when I realized, holy crap, this is something that people find value in, right? This is something that I can try and build around. And before long, it went from side hustle and passion project to, hey man, I'm diving all in. I'm quitting the corporate 9-to-5 world, and I'm going after this thing. And I have to credit my wife for that too, because she was the one who said, hey, don't worry about the money, because we can fix finances if we get in trouble in that spot, but we can't fix you being 10, 20 years down the road regretting that you didn't take the chance when you had it. So here we are, 1 year into entrepreneurship for the first time, and it's been a wild ride, man. It's what I'm doing currently is just making fantasy football tools, resources. I have a community that 300 plus fantasy football players are using to win their leagues every year. So it's been a wild ride, man. It's a very weird story. It's not one that people hear too frequently, but it's been a lot of fun. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Mikey, so much is there. So and we're gonna throughout this
Sorry.
conversation, we're gonna unpack a little bit of that because that's super interesting. Do me a favor though, for the people who are listening,
Yeah.
give us the quick overview of fantasy football. Like, how does it
Yeah.
work? What is it, right? Just so everybody's on the same page with
Totally,
what this is.
100%. Yeah. It's a great way to enjoy the game and game of football, the game of NFL. When I say football, I'm talking NFL American, right? I'm not talking about soccer. But it's just a great way to enjoy the game and kind of take ownership for yourself and have some skin in the game, if you will, have some sort of investment. And the way that it works is basically you draft a team of players. There's 32 teams in the NFL. You draft a team of quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and maybe some other things depending on what type of league you're in. And the gist of it is, the better that they do on the football field, the better your fantasy football team does. So you're awarded points for their statistics. If a quarterback throws a touchdown or a running back rushes for 100 yards, the better that they do in their own football game, your fantasy football team scores points, and you're trying to beat your opponent who's also cheering on their guy. So, we're in Wisconsin, Pat. Obviously, we got a lot of Packer fans in Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
This gives people a reason and a way to tune in and pay attention to what's happening with the Houston Texans or the Arizona Cardinals and teams that they might not otherwise follow. And it's just a way to add some spice to your Sunday, if you will.
Got it. Thank you for that. Okay, so football, kind of this, as you were saying, this has been kind of an obsession for a long, long time with you. You start creating these tools. Mikey, what was it? Just the encouragement of friends that got you to start posting onto the internet? And part B, did you see results right away, or kind of just explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So for me, it was kind of the sort of thing where I started creating these tools. You hear this all the time with entrepreneurs. I started creating these tools because I saw a need for them. But what's a little bit interesting about my story is I didn't initially create them for anybody else but myself. I created them for me when I'm playing fantasy football.
Right.
And yeah, like I mentioned, there was one buddy in particular, shout out Patrick Carroll, if you're listening, and he's like, dude, you have to start putting this stuff on Reddit. And prior to that, I was blogging from here and there, but I wasn't overly promoting it. I didn't really have any readers besides maybe my mom from time to time.
Yeah.
But it all started with encouragement from Patrick Carroll, who said, dude, you have to go put this thing on Reddit. And I think once I saw that, it was immediate success. It was immediate, very positive feedback. Of course, he had some negative trolls that were,
sure,
no matter what you do, they're not going to like it. But it was pretty immediate feedback that kind of got the ball rolling and kind of turned into this massive vehicle of like, okay, this is what I want to do for my life and for the rest of my life. And I started showing it to more and more friends and putting it on different social media platforms. And it's just, there was enough there to tell me that I have an opportunity to turn this into a career. So I dove all in and went for it.
Okay. So the time, give us the kind of the calendar from the time you launch you put your first post on there where you're, hey, this is for sale, right?
Yeah.
To the time where you sit down with your wife going, hey, honey, you got a minute? I want to talk about something. Like
Yes.
how long of it are we talking about? Are we talking about a year? Are we talking about 3 weeks? What give me a sense of that?
I'd say there was probably about a 1.5 to 2 year gap there.
Okay.
Of me creating content, creating resources, and doing it seriously. So the main tool that I create for fantasy football during the season takes me about 30 hours a week. So you can imagine, Pat, I eventually got to a point where like I cannot do this and my typical, I was running the sales department over at a local marketing agency, and it's like there's no way for me to do both, right? So there's probably it was 1.5 to 2 years where I eventually kind of reached that intersection of I need to make a decision of if I'm going to pursue this or I'm going to leave it behind me and just continue down my career that I've been building. So it was about 18 months to 2 years or so.
Okay. So Mikey, here's the other part that I'm fascinated with is you have a conversation with your wife and she says to you, go for it, right? Like, okay. I got to believe that conversation for a lot of people out there listening who've got ideas, who are like, I want to do kind of what you're doing in the sense of they want to go into their own business. They want to do their own thing. Right. What made her confident, Mikey, that it was just like, yeah, this is cool. This is good that you're doing that. Like, what was it about it? Did she see like the income flowing in? Obviously you're happy. So there's that personal contentment, right? But I mean, for a lot of people, let's be honest, it's a jump, right? It's like, hey, you might flame out after like another year of this.
Yep. And you have to start all over again. You're spot on, Patrick. And to me, there's two things that come to mind. One is the one you already mentioned. There's the emotional value tied to it, because, I'd be lying to you if I wasn't also like, it all kind of culminated at the same time where I was also at this crossroads in my career and in my life where it was like I was waking up every day, I was doing my work, I was checking the boxes, but there was nothing about it that was like feeding me energy. I wasn't like jumping out of bed like I need to go to work. And she saw that I was just kind of wearing down, right? But to answer your question about what gave her the confidence, I was lucky enough to have some social proof tied to it, right? I had been doing it for 18 to 24 months already as a part-time thing, giving it away for free, but having a ton of positive feedback and like testimonials, but B, people asking me for my Venmo so that they could donate money. And her whole thing was, if you have people that are like asking to give you money when you're not even asking for it yourself, imagine what you could do with this thing if you like pursued it and went after this full time. So she more than anybody was kind of, it would have been so easy for her, Pat, to be like, oh, you're the breadwinner, I guess would be the word. You make most of our income. We have 2 kids under 7. You can't do this. She was the exact opposite. She was the one who said, you have to do this. Otherwise you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting that you didn't take the chance to do something you love. So
that's super cool.
Yeah. And I think, I did have, to your point, I had that benefit of social proof. I had something tangible that I could say, this has already been successful at a minimal capacity. So there is that. I don't know if I would have taken the leap without that, to be honest.
And that's a point that let's double click on that just for a second, Mikey, because I mean, you were doing this for, you said 1.5 years, 2 years, right? So it's not like, hey, one day I just woke up, and then you've got an income coming in from this. So you've got data already, which is super, super, super smart. Okay, Mikey, here's what I'm fascinated with then too is you decide, you have this conversation with your wife, you decide I'm going all in on this. What the F happens next? I mean, what's that first week? Like, okay, now you've got that adrenaline rush of like, I did it, man. I'm out. You know what? I'm out. Hey, I could just imagine when you walk into the office that day when it's like, everybody kiss my ass because next time you see me, I'm going to be on top of the hill, right? I mean, this is like, you got to be pumped up. And then kind of reality sets in, right? It's like,
For sure.
what do I do
100%.
now? Like, how do I structure my day? Like,
Yeah.
talk to me about that, man.
Well, and especially as a first time entrepreneur, right? My idea of running a business prior to doing this was I started a lawn mowing business when I was like 6,
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of adrenaline of like, okay, I'm going to be on top of the world, and there's a lot of friends that were pumping me up, right? You're going to be on ESPN. And I don't even, that's not even what I'm going for. Like
Right.
that's not even what I'm trying to do. But for me, once kind of the adrenaline wore off and it was time to like buckle down and get serious, there's a couple things. If I remember right, the very first thing that I did was like step one was optimizing my LinkedIn profile. I knew that LinkedIn was going to be the biggest driver for my sales, my marketing. I already had a following there from my previous decade in B2B sales.
Yep.
So I wanted to start there. And when I say optimizing it, I'm talking about making sure my profile picture was flashy and unique. Like most of the time it's headshot in a suit. Mine is a yellow background, a guy with a backwards hat and a football. I wanted something that popped at people, right?
Mikey, I want to pause you right there for a second, so don't lose that thought. Your LinkedIn profile shot is awesome. And I mean, like I've seen a lot of, you kill it. It does have that vibe about like, I want to talk to this guy. I want to interact. This guy looks like a fun guy. Yeah, very cool. So continue. I just want to give you the props on that.
You know what my favorite part about that picture, Pat, is? My 3-year-old daughter took that. I was just like bending over thinking she wouldn't get me in the camera. And I'm like, this is my favorite picture ever now. But
yeah. Awesome.
So yeah, man, making sure the profile picture was something that popped. I purposely chose a bright yellow background because it'll jump out at you. And I wanted to make sure that my headline, the thing with your headline, you want to make sure that it kind of gives a really quick sales pitch, almost like, here's what I do, here's why you would want to click on my profile, follow what I'm doing. I wanted to make sure that was optimized. I wanted to optimize my banner image. So when people did visit my profile, there was something like that's prime real estate where people can, oh, okay, here's a little bit more about what he does. The featured section about me. I wanted to make sure I spent time on all of that because I knew that was going to be the primary vehicle for everything that I did, sales and marketing. But after that whole like, okay, let's get LinkedIn going, man, it was eye-opening in the best and worst ways, right? I had to figure out legal language for my website because my, fantasy football, it's not gambling, so it's totally legal, but it's not legal to do it daily for some countries or for some states. And so I needed legal languages. I needed to figure out the accounting side of like keeping finances separate and saving receipts and just all of the business stuff that has nothing to do with fantasy football. There was a huge learning curve there for me, and I'm still learning. Like there's plenty that I don't know. So that was, and getting the website optimized, stuff like that. So it was all on the business stuff, most of which was like business for dummies, right? Opening up that book and starting from scratch.
Well, let me pause you there for a sec, because with that stuff like legal language, like the bookkeeping, like all these types of things, like how would you even know about this stuff, Mikey? Like, where did you know about this stuff already, or were people consulting you and helping you out, or how did you come across some of this stuff? Because it's like
guessing. If I'm being completely honest, it was guessing. It was like it was more so like through just generic conversations with people where people would say something like, wait, what do you do if somebody buys your season pass and then has a really bad fantasy football season and tries to like sue you for it? I'm like, I should probably talk to a lawyer. Or, I bought a new computer and my buddy's like, hey, make sure you save that for writing it off for taxes. And I said, I should probably talk to an accountant. So it was just kind of a lot of like trial and error, a lot of guessing, and just kind of like forcing my way through the woods and just learning as I go. It's not ideal by any means. Like there's a big part of me that wishes I knew this stuff ahead of time, but I can't change that part of the journey, right? A lot of it was like learning as I go and chopping down trees when I got to them.
Yeah. Mikey, one of the things that's really interesting about you is where you came from before this, right?
Sure.
You were heavy duty B2B sales, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that experience, just what that was like. And I gotta believe that a lot of the things that you learn in that space has been able to transfer into your new into
Oh,
your new kind of gig. But let me hear it from you,
100%.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on, dude. And I will tell you, Pat, I say this all the time, that there's one part of me that says, man, I wish I would have started this 10 years ago, right?
Yep.
What if I would have started this 10 years ago? Where would I
Yep.
be now? But then the smart part of my brain kicks in and says, it wouldn't have worked 10 years ago because you needed to spend 10 years in sales. You needed to be at a marketing agency. You needed to be on the leadership team. You had to learn all of these skills and like everything that you need to be able to effectively run a business. If I did this 10 years ago without that path, I wouldn't know how to sell. I wouldn't know anything about marketing. I wouldn't know how to lead people if I ever do hire anybody. So, but I mean, you're spot on as far as sales goes. Like you'll hear any entrepreneur say that every entrepreneur needs to know how to sell. And I would say that 90% of the revenue that I have generated to this point has come with some form of manual sales intervention at some point, whether it's me
Mhm.
reaching out to them on LinkedIn or Twitter or, at a conference or anything like that. It has not yet's the big word. It has not yet been automated through marketing and, people landing on my website and deciding to purchase. That's all stuff that I'm building towards and trying to get to because
Right.
candidly, if I'm trying to sell 2,000 people, I can't be reaching out to 2,000 people. But to jumpstart and get some revenue coming in, that sales background and that sales experience has been absolutely gigantic. Because it's everything that you've learned in sales training for years and years and years of like how to talk to people, how to engage, how to know when to engage, how to following up, right? A lot of people fall flat when they don't know how to follow up with a prospect and being able to circle back around. So it's just, if I had not spent a decade plus in sales, I probably would have folded up in year one because I wouldn't have made anything. Everything needed to be sold.
So good. So good. Um, so Mikey, at this point right now, just kind of describe for us what's a typical day in the life look like for you, right? And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things going on, but kind of sum it up. Give us the pie chart of like, okay, hey, I'm up every morning. You got a couple kids. Well, I'm up in the morning, get the kids to school. Then I do this. What? Give us that breakdown.
Say it'll depend on what month you ask me
Yep.
because what
Yep.
the first thing I've come to notice is when there's no football, right? So between the months of January and September, that's the off season. And
Yep.
I've learned that is my on the business time, right? This is where I'm updating my website. I'm filing taxes for the first time, which I don't know anything about any of that. I'm, looking at marketing ideas, planning content, all of that. But then during the season, right? September through January, that's when I need to deliver on what people have paid me for. And so that day-to-day process is a lot less social media marketing, focusing on the website. It's going to be a lot more creating the tools that people are paying me for. Currently, the way that a typical day works for me, Pat, is I wake up 6 a.m. every day. No snoozing allowed is my new rule because I'm a chronic snoozer. And shout out to Jordan Peg. I'm gonna pronounce his last name wrong because I always call it Pagel. But anyway, he's a fitness coach I've been working with, and he's like, no, can't snooze, got to get up. So anyway, get up at 6 a.m. every day. I drink 32 ounces of water before I do anything else. The key to that, by the way, is I leave it out on my counter before I go to bed so that it's room temperature in the morning. A lot easier to chug 32 ounces of water that way. I go for I call it a sunlight walk. Make sure I get my body outside for 10 minutes in the morning. Jordan says getting the sunlight in your eyeballs sets the tone for the rest of the day. And then I do some reading and I start doing my LinkedIn stalking. When I say stalking, every single day I'm spending at least an hour engaging on other people's posts, not mine, other people's posts on LinkedIn. Then I get my son ready for school, get him on the bus. And then I go to my LinkedIn posting and I post at 8:30 a.m. every day and spend the next 30 to 60 minutes engaging on other posts, interacting with people that comment on mine. And then come about 9:30, 10 o'clock, that's when I focus on content basically for the rest of the day. I carve out about 3 to 4 hours to write. Right now I'm writing off-season previews for literally every player in football, 500 to 1,000 words on every single player. 3:30 rolls around, I have to get my son off the bus. And then usually I crank out a workout right in there. And then between the hours of 5 and 8, I lock my cell phone in my bedroom so that I make sure that my wife and my kids are getting 100% of my attention between the hours of 5 and 8 when we're eating dinner, spending time together, playing, watching TV, going outside, whatever it is. So, and then bed no later than 11 o'clock every single night.
Damn, Mikey,
Yeah.
that's a great routine.
It took me 34 years, which is how old I am, to come up with a routine. I used to just like wake up and, okay, what do I need to do? But Jordan has been huge in like making sure that I'm putting routines together so that I'm staying on top of what I need to every single day. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded, but
No, that was awesome. That was awesome. And one of the things that you've touched on now a couple times throughout this conversation is LinkedIn. Like,
yeah.
It seems to me, Mikey, that your success within that space is time spent in that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
What other talk to us just about how you approach LinkedIn, what you do, like, people who are listening to this, and this may be somebody, we got a lot of listeners who are not just entrepreneurs, they're just business people, right?
Sure. Yeah,
Like,
totally.
how do you use it and how do you maximize that channel?
People ask me, Pat, what's the number one piece of advice you'd give to a younger version of yourself? And it's by far spending 1 to 2 hours every single day on LinkedIn doing a number of different things. And it doesn't even matter it doesn't matter if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in sales, you're in marketing. Like, now is the time to be building a personal brand, whether you're job searching, whether you're trying to start a business, whatever, whether you're trying to make some sales. And I definitely have to pay a shout out to Jackie Hermes. She has been instrumental in my pretty much everything that I know about LinkedIn. I learned from Jackie. But my process, step one, in my opinion and my experience, is getting, like, before you do anything, optimize your profile. Get the good profile picture, get the banner image, update your header, all of that. But my process on LinkedIn is, before I do anything selfish, like posting about myself or anything, I spend an hour at least commenting on other people's posts. So, for example, I know Justin Welsh has a gigantic, massive LinkedIn following, and he posts around 7:30 or around 7:15 every morning. I'm on LinkedIn at 7:12 waiting for that post, because I want to be one of the first to comment, because then more people will see my comment. And if your profile is optimized, that means they're going to see your profile picture, and they're going to see a short little snippet of your headline that gives them a quick glimpse into what your world is about. So I want to be one of the first there, because then I know people are coming to Justin Welsh's posts, and they're going to see mine before they see a lot of other ones, and that leads to profile clicks. The next thing I do is I click on the button on LinkedIn that says, "Who has observed your profile?" And I send a connect request or a direct message to every single one of those people that have observed my profile in the last day, and completely selfless about it. It's just, hey, as it does, LinkedIn notified me that you were recently checking out my profile. Was there anything specific you were hoping to see, find, gain, anything specific you're hoping to get from my profile? I'm happy to help however I can. And I leave it at that.
Yeah.
And sometimes nobody responds. Sometimes people say, "Oh, I just thought your profile was interesting." But sometimes people say, "Oh, I saw the football emojis and the beer emojis, and I noticed you do something with fantasy football. I'm a big fantasy nerd myself." And then that organically just turns into a sales conversation from there, right? So I do all of that for an hour before I do anything else. And then at 8:30 a.m. every day, I post and engage with people that interact with the post. So it's just this big cyclical routine that I do every single day, and that's how I attract followers and make connections and sales in the end. So
yeah. You mentioned Justin Welsh. I follow him, and for anybody else who's listening, check him out and check out his content. It's superb. It's really cool. Hey, Mikey, talk to me about your process for just creating content. Like, how do you go about that? How do you plan this out? What are hacks that you use? I'm guessing that, like a lot of people, you have peaks and valleys. And by that, I mean, there are times when it's like, man, I got a zillion ideas. And there are times it's like, okay, what do I want to write about today? Like,
Totally.
so talk to us about that.
Yeah, man. It's so that's something I'm currently auditing as we speak. And candidly, Pat, one of my biggest struggles with creating on the platform
Yeah.
is it's not knowing what to post. It's not knowing which topic is going to make the most sense for me personally. So for example, most of my posts, I'd say at least 80 to 90% of my posts have nothing to do with fantasy football. It's about my journey as an entrepreneur, sales tips that I've learned, LinkedIn
I
tips
love
that
it.
I've learned.
I love it.
And then 10% or so is fantasy football focused. Now, the fantasy football stuff doesn't perform nearly as well as the other stuff, which
Yep.
makes sense, right? It's
Yep.
much more niche. So I've been frequently thinking about, okay, what's the right balance? How much of what should I post of what? But to answer your question about where does content come from, so I'm currently enrolled in Justin Welch's course. If anybody's ever done that, by the way, I reluctantly purchased that. By the way, Pat, I was like, what am I going to learn that I didn't already like? Not
Yeah.
trying to be cocky, but I was like,
Yeah.
how much am I really going to learn here? And I spent 10 minutes doing one of his content exercises, and I came up with about 75 different content ideas in about 10
Awesome.
minutes. Insane.
Right.
Prior to that, though, my best methods for generating content ideas is, I mentioned to you earlier, I spend an hour commenting on other people's posts.
Yep.
You'd be surprised how frequently that becomes a post idea. My comment on somebody else's post, I'll put into a spreadsheet and with a link to that post and say, expand on this idea or expand on this topic in your next post. So commenting on other people's posts are one. I have post-it notes by my bed because for some reason I wake up at like 3 a.m. with ideas. I have not done this, but I've heard some people do a waterproof dry erase board in their shower because a lot of people have really good ideas in the shower and then lose them
Oh my
before they
gosh.
get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have not done that, but that's totally happened to me where I'm like, oh, so what I do is I tell Siri, like, hey, remind me to,
Yep. Yep.
do XYZ. So there's just a lot of ways where once an idea sparks in my head, I have either my post-it notes nearby or I have a checklist in my phone of like possible LinkedIn posts, and I just have this huge backlog of possible LinkedIn posts. So it's basically just capturing moments or ideas when they enter your head instead of letting them slip away.
Mikey, we've had a few entrepreneurs on here, and as well as a number of people in the marketing space. Obviously, that's who we're talking to here. But I really find that there's a theme that comes up, and it seems like the ones who are killing it, the ones who are freaking really destroying it in their space, have got the ability that they are able to get continual customer feedback as to what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? They just have this information loop. So they have their finger on my customers know this. They are looking for this. This is how I'm going to supply them. How do you go about kind of connecting back to your customers? What are some of the ways you're going about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I won't spend too much time on the obvious one of sending out like surveys, right? Surveying your
Yep.
customer.
Yep. Yep.
What was your experience? How can, but some of the more indirect ways that have worked for me is anybody who's one of my subscribers has access to a community that I host on Discord.
Mm.
And it's turned into this really fun community. Like people have turned from subscribers into friends. It's turned into this great community, but there's a lot of people out there who ask each other questions, or there's a spot inside of Discord where they can give product feedback and people will be like, hey, just thought of this for this week. And I'll, store that in the back of my mind. So it's kind of this ongoing feedback loop, if you will. One of the biggest things for me is direct outreach. And maybe this is where my sales experience comes into play, but direct outreach specifically when somebody cancels. If somebody cancels their subscription, that should be a red flag to any entrepreneur, and I want to know why. So
Yep.
I'm very diligent about reaching out and then following up just to say, hey, thank you. Like you gave me a chance. That's all I could ask for. I'm a guy chasing a childhood dream. Like, thank you for giving me a chance. Is there any candid feedback that you're willing to provide so that I can avoid future cancellations, right? And
Right.
I encourage them. I'm like, be ruthless, be brutal, like shred everything that I'm doing so that I can fix it. And I'd say beyond that, Pat, I go over to Twitter all the time and just look at what questions people are asking on Twitter, A, because then if I can answer them, that helps a sales conversation. But B, sometimes those bring up ideas where it's like, well, maybe if they had this type of tool, that would solve their problem, and who else is having these issues. So there's a little bit of direct, there's a little bit of indirect, and kind of just some browsing on my own, if you will.
Awesome. You know, one of the things too that when I've talked to other entrepreneurs, and I remember this from talking to my man Jason Spray. Jason left the corporate world. He went into started his own franchise, which was house painting. Now he's out in the Virginia area.
Sure.
But I was talking to him. I don't know how long ago it was, when he was maybe a few years into his gig, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, how's things going? What are the big learnings that you have?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Probably the biggest learning is I should have scaled sooner. I should have just added people and put bodies into this quicker. And because I could have added that in, I think I could have grown faster." And
Sure.
it just struck me is really kind of out of left field, just because it's like, as a person starting out, it's like the last thing I want to do is I'm trying to minimize my expenses. But this could be,
Right.
if I add a body, even a part-time body, that might not be just an additional body. That might be a 4x factor in getting things done. Mike, just talk to us about your thoughts on that. Like, how are you looking at scaling? Or is this like maybe the Justin Welsh approach, which I've heard him talk about it? It's like, you know what? I don't want to freaking manage anybody. My goal is to get this in a place where I could do less work.
Yep, totally.
Right. So talk to us about,
I'd say
how you're approaching that.
I'd say it's more the latter, to be honest, Pat. And
yeah.
And I joked with you earlier that a lot of my friends were like, "You're going to be on ESPN, or you're going to be a millionaire, and this thing's going to," and that's, honest to God, that's not what I'm going for. Like, I don't have an interest in being at ESPN. I want to be Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, and I don't need to be rich, or nobody's going to say I don't want to be rich, but I didn't start this thing to become a millionaire, become a billionaire. It's not like I saw this golden goose egg and I started chasing it. For me, it's more about exactly what Justin always talks about, which is like, listen, I have one life to live. I just want to spend it doing something that I enjoy every single day. So right now, my goal and my focus is just getting my income to a place where it's livable, and then I'm able to put money away for retirement and for my kids' college and all that. I don't need to be a millionaire for that. So now there are opportunities and ideas and thoughts for expansion several years from now, not anytime soon. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of people that are like, when are you going to do baseball? When are you going to do basketball? I love the game of baseball. I love the game of basketball. I don't love the fantasy versions of either of those. So if I ever have those, I will be hiring somebody to do it. It won't be me. But I think Justin's spot on, Pat. For me, I'm not trying to build this huge empire. I just want to make enough money where we're not going to lose our house. I can keep dinner on the table. We can maintain our lifestyle, save for retirement. And I'm spending every day doing something that I genuinely, truly am obsessed with. So for me, I don't know if it's ever going to be the sort of thing where I hire. And if I do, it's going to be more like outsourcing marketing. I don't necessarily want an internal marketing team. I would want to outsource it and have somebody running it for me, or an assistant or something like that. Stuff that helps me stay organized. I definitely have come to realize I need to work with a coach just to keep my shiny object syndrome in check, and okay, these are the 3 things to focus on. But yeah, it's not the sort of thing where I picture this being like a 50-person company anytime in the near future. That could change, but not right now.
Cool. Basement Brewed. Okay, Mikey, talk to us about what are the products that you offer? So someone new coming onto your radar, what do you offer? What's out there? What are the product lines that you have?
You know what's funny is if you asked me this a year ago, I would have been so all over the place with my answer, because none of it was like bullet item. Nowadays it's like, it's a list. There's 8 tools, 8 services, right? I finally figured that all out. I'm trying to figure out the best way to talk about it without talking to you for 20 minutes straight about what the 8 things are. So I'll try and boil it down. But the biggest thing, the number one thing that people come to me for, and where this whole thing started, I have a tool that helps fantasy football players set their lineup. And what I mean by that is anybody who's played fantasy football before is familiar with the struggle every single week of, I have these 2 quarterbacks, but I can only pick one, or I have 5 running backs and I can only pick 3. And every single week, there's always this dilemma of, should I choose player X or player Y? And of course, every single week, that is often that decision often becomes the difference between winning and losing. So that number one tool that I create is meant to help people, A, make those decisions, but B, make those decisions with confidence. So basically, it's a matchup analysis and a matchup analyzer for every single player on every single team in every single game, every single week. So like, no matter who is on your fantasy football team or the 2 players you're trying to decide between, you come look at the tool and it's going to give you a matchup analysis for those 2 players and then help you make that decision between the 2 of them. Beyond that, and I don't expect that to make a ton of sense, there's some visuals on my website and a video that helps kind of like walk through it for anybody that wants to see it. But beyond that, the online community is a service that subscribers have access to, where they, we basically are out there workshopping our dilemmas with one another, right? It's, who do I start? Who do I draft? Should I do this trade? Who should I pick up? We're out there helping each other. One thing that I do that's different than any other service, I guess, that's out there is I actually send text message recommendations to my subscribers that are timely in accordance with the news. So if news breaks that, the Packers' number 1 running back, Aaron Jones, is not going to play, all of my subscribers get a notification right on their phone that says, Aaron Jones isn't going to play, beat your competition to the waiver wire and go pick up AJ Dillon or the backup so that you have somebody that you can use. So there's lineup setting stuff, there's the online community, there's the text recommendations, 2 different draft resources for people to use when they're doing their draft, one of which is a rankings list of players, but the other one is much more strategy based and helps people construct their roster as they're going about building their draft. So if they're stuck in the 8th round, they know exactly where to go based on what they've already done.
Yeah.
And then 2 really quick last ones that kind of set BBFF apart from anything else. I have a touchdown regression cheat sheet, which uses basic mathematical principles to help you identify, here's players that are likely to score a touchdown this week, and here's players that are not likely to score a touchdown. And that goes a really long way with helping people, the difference between wins and losses, if you will. Same thing with streamers. If you're in bye week hell or injury hell and you just need to find somebody that you can plug and play, I have a cheat sheet that makes it easy for you to identify. Here's a lesser known name that you can just scoop up and throw onto your roster. So that I realized that was kind of like word vomit, but there's 8 different tools and services that kind of are all, they kind of do everything from draft all the way through the end of the season. Anything you could possibly need, it's holding your hand the whole way. So
cool. How you've talked about this earlier, Mikey, that you put together, and you're in the process, I think, right now, right? Of like, for each player, you're putting together 500 to 1,000 words about each player, right? Your take on the quarterbacks, your take on the tight ends, blah blah blah, right?
Not as much like most of my writing and what I do is stats and facts based. So it's me giving a lot of like, in this scenario, here's how this player has performed. So it's me giving you data more than my take. Now, at the end of everything, I do offer opinion and say, here's the way I am approaching this player. But before all of that, it's giving you all the data that you need to make your own decisions. And if you still can't decide, that's where my opinion's at the bottom to say, here's what I would do,
Right. So, okay, that's interesting. And then, Mikey, where are you pulling this? Where are you pulling your information from? I mean, I imagine you're looking at like a zillion sources, but maybe not. Maybe it's like, you know what? It's actually these 2, and I get 95% of it. Well, like, how do you? Yeah. What sources, and how do you go about that?
Yeah. So you were right with the former. There's a million different sources, but ultimately, what it all comes down to is I have this absolutely massive Google sheet it has every single player's game and their stats, their box score, like how many catches or how many passes they caught, receiving yards, touchdowns, every single game going back to, I think, 2007 for every single player. And I have all different algorithms and formulas and all sorts of stuff that's already built in, where when I pull the data, it spits out information that I'm looking for that I can then report back to my subscribers to make it easy for them to make those decisions. But yeah, I'm pulling those from just some of your typical databases like NFL.com and Pro Football Reference is probably my favorite free website out there. Like you could find any statistic that you're looking for over on Pro Football Reference, but most of my findings and analysis come from my own like homemade Google Sheets, and I have like 6 or 7 Google Sheets. They're ugly as hell. Like you would not want to look at them.
Yeah.
But the back end stuff, that's all stuff that I cook up on my own, just pulling data from like Pro Football Reference, for example.
So, Mikey, when you were getting into the space,
Yeah.
I'm curious as to who did you look at as other business models? So let me, and here I'm approaching this as I'm not a big fantasy. I mean,
Sure.
I'm not into this world. So
Yeah.
where were you looking at other models on this? And are there other models to look at? And then part one, part two is what did you see as the advantage for you and your business going, well, everybody seems to be over here.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
could make a really nice niche right here.
That's a
Right?
great.
Was there talk about that?
Yeah, there was that moment
Interesting.
where, and there's 2 sides to that, and I'll get to it because I want to make sure I don't skip your first question. But there were 2 sides of having my own niche where, like you said, everybody's over here, I'm going to be over here.
Yep.
One is my tools. My tools themselves are different than anything else that's out there. There's a lot of redundancy in the industry. The stuff that I do is different. That's not to say it's for everybody. Like there's what some competitors do is going to be much better fit for some people, but mine is different than what's out there. But the other side is the way I go about it. Everybody else is on Twitter and I'm focusing on LinkedIn. You're not going to find too many fantasy football people hammering LinkedIn the way that I am. But I told you I was going to skip that question and come back to it. And then I kind of started talking about it because I get so excited about it. But to answer your first question, when this whole thing started, keep in mind, before I was a creator in a business, I was a player. I was a fantasy football player, and I subscribed to 4for4 Football. I subscribed to JJ Zacharyson and the Late Round podcast. I subscribed to Evan Silva and Established the Run. He used to be at Roto World. So there were definitely tools and resources that I had used prior. And more than that, it was the people. More than the resources, it was the people. JJ Zacharyson, Evan Silva, those are 2 guys that I look up to. Like, they will forever be the first 2 faces on the fantasy football Mount Rushmore, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And they became kind of like mentors to me. This is where the sales background came into play, Pat. I reached out to both, like, hey, I'm an aspiring analyst. Can we talk about like what I can do? And Evan Silva's been great with helping me. JJ Zacharyson hopped on a call with me on Valentine's Day back in like 2018, and that kind of helped kind of kickstart everything for me. So those guys have become mentors. But then I kind of and JJ's big thing was always, you got to find something that makes you unique. It's got to be something unique, right? Because it's a very saturated marketplace. There's millions of fantasy podcasts, people trying to create tools, resources, etc. And my tools happened by accident almost. And it's like I said to you before, it's how so many entrepreneurs start, where it's like I found a need in the marketplace. Those tools that I was subscribing to before I started creating my own, they didn't tell me the whole story. They didn't tell me everything that I wanted when making some of my own decisions. So I finally said, well, screw it. I'm going to create something where I do tell the whole story, and it's going to help me make those decisions. And that kind of gets into the next part of your question, Pat, was, oh, now I realized I'm doing something that's different than everybody else that's out there, right? All these other fantasy football companies, they're usually giving you lists. Like, here's my rankings, player A, player B, player C, and you're just expected to follow that blindly and say, okay, well, they have this guy on top of this guy, I'm going to pick him. Mine is much more I have rankings, but I also want to tell you the full story. I want to tell you why this player is here and this player's here. I want to tell you why I'm approaching this player in the draft, but avoiding this player in the draft. And I also incorporate a lot of strategy into mine. It's not just here's a list of guys. It's here's the way that I would approach the draft if I was drafting from the 5 spot like you are. And it gives people a guide, a real guide that says, okay, he's standing in my shoes. This is how his brain would work navigating the situation. So I don't know if that kind of helps tell how my stuff is a little bit different, but that was a moment for me where I realized I am doing something that's different than other people. And like I said, it's not for everybody. There's people that just want a list that says, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do so I can do it. But there's a lot of people that take a lot of pride in making their own decisions. And that's where a lot of my stuff comes in, because I'm empowering you to make your own, but I'm giving you all the data that you can do, that you need to make those decisions confidently. I'm not telling you what to do. I have recommendations, but ultimately it's your decision who you're going to pick. And a lot of people take a lot of pride in that. You know what I mean?
For sure. You mentioned Twitter, that you don't really spend a lot of time on there. Is that something that why I guess here's my question, Mikey. Why don't you do more on Twitter?
So I should take a step back. I'd say Twitter is my number 2 platform, but when I compare it to LinkedIn, for example, it's not close.
Yeah.
So I would, if I'm being completely candid, and I don't know why it wouldn't be, the reason that I don't spend nearly as much time on Twitter is because of how saturated it is. Anybody and everybody who wants to be doing something in fantasy football is on Twitter. So it's becoming kind of redundant for a lot of people that are trying to consume fantasy football content and data and analysis, which obviously from my standpoint, that makes it harder to stand out in that crowd. And I'm not Evan Silva, I'm not JJ Zacharyson, so it's harder for me to get people to say, why should, there, a lot of people would say, why should I listen to you? I'm already listening to JJ and Evan and, Matthew Berry, who's a behemoth in the fantasy space. So it's a harder platform to really stand out. And I feel like I have a significant advantage over on LinkedIn because nobody else is over there. So that might not be the right thing either, Pat. Like I might be doing it completely wrong, but that's just what's worked for me to this point. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that what got me here won't get me there. Right. So
right.
I need to be aware of that too.
Mikey, as we kind of wrap this thing up, I got a couple more questions for you. The first is you've been doing this now full time for, you said about 1.5 years, 2 years. Yes, I got that right?
Full time, I just reached 1 year in March.
1 year. Sorry about that. For full time. What has been big surprises for you up until now? And that could be both good and bad. Things that you didn't,
I would say the biggest, and maybe this is more like time sensitive because it's been top of mind for me lately, but I don't want to say I thought it would be easier. That's not true, but I thought I would be able to be more organized and structured. That's probably the better way to put it. I have become very aware that I need a business coach that's there to help me stay focused. I've been talking a lot to Amy Burks. I don't know if you're connected with her on LinkedIn. She's terrific. Her whole thing is one thing. What's your most important thing? That's her whole thing.
Yeah.
And I've been terrible with that. I know for a fact, Pat, that I have wasted days of productivity because I'm not focused on the right thing at the right time. So I think my biggest surprise has been how difficult it is to manage everything all at once while keeping your eyes on the prize and focusing on the right thing at the right time. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that is a great answer. But I have a follow-up question, Mikey, and that is, how then do you decide where you are going to focus, right? Because some things I can imagine in business, you may focus on a particular piece of it, but you may not see the return from that for months later, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you then? What's your process, Mikey, for finding that focus?
And candidly, that's been my biggest. I told you that's been my biggest bugaboo to date, and it's the number one thing that I'm learning as we speak. Like I'm making my way to and through that progress. So for me, I know in conversations with Amy, she's very good at drilling down and double clicking several times to help you identify your why. Like, why is it truly, like deep in the depths of my soul and my heart, why is it that I'm doing what I'm doing? And once you reach that answer, and for me, it's my family. Like I want to make sure that, you know, I am not only making money, that part's obvious, but
Right.
I'm showing up for them in a way that's positive and healthy and who I need to be as their dad or as a husband. And once you understand the true why of like what it is that you're trying to accomplish, then you start to like reverse engineer it. Like, okay, for me to get from A to B, what needs to happen? And it's easier to kind of narrow down and focus and say, this is something I need to focus on today versus here's something that I would have focused on today a week ago, but now I realize that's something that I can focus on in a month or whatever it is. So it's hard, Pat. I'm like, there's no, it should be so easy, right? Like, okay, I want to grow my business, then I should do this, but there's 50 ways that you can interpret that, you know?
Yeah, no, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And there's so many distractions.
It's impossible.
We'll get you back, man. And when you've got it figured out, because I know you will, we'll get you back and you'll share that.
Yeah, for sure.
I got to ask this one because when I was talking to my daughter, she was like, hey, can you ask Mikey this one? And that is the Aaron Rodgers question. Does he still have any value in fantasy football?
Oh, for sure, man. I would argue that he is one of the steals in early 2023 draft. So I'm in the middle of 30 plus drafts as we speak, like right now. And Aaron Rodgers is my number one most rostered player. I have him in about 32% of my 2023 teams already. And I could literally talk for hours about why, but last year was easily the worst year of Aaron Rodgers' career. So if you look at his career averages as opposed to what he did last year, he's a prime bounce back candidate. But the number one mistake that a lot of fantasy football players make is they think about last year and they think that's the new norm. So last year, just to give you a really quick example, I just pulled up my spreadsheet here. He completed just 64% of his passes, which was the fifth lowest mark in his career. 3,600 passing yards, which was the lowest. 26 passing touchdowns, which was the second lowest. 12 interceptions, which was the second most. And if you calculate all that from a fantasy standpoint, he had 13.8. He averaged 13.8 fantasy points per game, whereas his career average in 207 games between 2005 2021, he averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game. And last year he did 13.8. So huge bounce back candidate. His draft value is completely suppressed. He's being drafted as the QB 15, the 15th best quarterback off the board. And prior to last year, he finished the last 12 seasons at worst QB 9. So he's being drafted way too low. He's going to win people leagues this year.
Interesting. Mikey, when you go to a cocktail party, are people all over you? Like, hey, give me some insights. Give me some, like, you got to be one of the most, come football season, you've got to be one of the most popular guests.
You know, the funniest thing that happens is the first thing people do when they realize what I do is they pull up their team. What do you think? Like, what do you think of my team? What do you think of this guy and this guy? And I'll be completely honest with you, Pat. It gets to a point where like your team looks great. Like I've looked at 100 teams at this party, but
yeah, that's exactly my team too. Right? Yeah, I got it.
100%. But yeah.
Oh damn, Mikey, this has been outstanding. Listen, you've got the last few minutes here. Take whatever time you want. How do people get in touch with you? What's the website?
Yeah,
pimp it out, man. Like, go for it, okay?
I feel like I should redo that whole what do people get when they subscribe with you thing. But no, man, the website's pretty simple. It's basementbrewedff.com. It is undergoing a facelift. Shout out to you, Devin Santamaria. He's helping me redo the website. Great guy. You know, as far as like getting in touch and hanging out with me, I'm like, if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm most active on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time by far, but also Twitter. My Twitter is @BBFFMikey. I will say, whereas I mentioned to you before, Pat, that LinkedIn is like 90% personal entrepreneurial stuff. Twitter is like 90 to 100% fantasy football. So if you only want the fantasy stuff, follow me on Twitter. But other than that, one quick thing that I did want to let anybody who's listening know if they do take a gander over to basementbrewedff.com, and thank you in advance if you do. Obviously, as a small business owner, any interest that we get is super exciting. But if you do take a gander and decide you want to give it a try this year, I did activate a coupon code for anybody who's listening, that when they sign up, if they just type in "over a pint," all caps, I don't know if that matters because I've never done it, but all caps, "over a pint," you'll get $10 off your subscription. And if you purchase it and you hate it, I will refund it. No questions asked, because I'm pretty confident that if you give it a shot, you're gonna love it, and hopefully you win your league.
That's awesome. Mikey, thanks for being on. For everybody listening, we'll put all that information that Mikey just gave you in the show notes, so you could just check that out. Mikey, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for coming on Over a Pint, man.
Dude, this was awesome. This is the best way to do noon on a Monday, so I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.